So, hello everyone, welcome. Super excited to have us here to talk about the Confessions of Lady Nijō. I really hope that you guys have been enjoying the book so far. It's very similar, but also very different, I think, to what we've read in the past. And I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say about it. Just as a little recap of some of the questions that I wanted you to consider and keep considering while we are reading the book. Can we analyze this work the same way we do Han period works, like Tale of Genji, Pillow Book, all of these things that we've been reading? How does Lady Nijō as an author pay tribute to her genre while also transforming it? What reasons could there be for the lack of reception history, which I'll talk a little bit more about and what we learned about in the introduction? And then how trustworthy Lady Nijō is as an author. Yes, okay, so just as a recap of the important people, we of course have Lady Nijō. This is not an artistic depiction of Lady Nijō because to my knowledge there are none that exist. So it's just kind of a pretty picture of what she would have looked like as a lady of the imperial court and a consort of the emperor. She, of course, lived in the 13th century, wrote this at the beginning of the 14th century. It recaps her relationship with several people, including primarily the Emperor Go-Fukakusa, who was emperor in the 13th century and had a very interesting feud with his brother, which I'll talk a little bit about later, and which we kind of learned about in the introduction. And then, of course, we have Karen Brazell, our illustrious translator. I just wanted to read a little bit about her, or give you a little bit of information about her. She was the chair of the Department of Asian Studies at Cornell from 1977 to 1982, and was director of the East Asia Studies program from 1987 to 1991. And in 1998, she became the founding director of the Global Performing Arts Consortium. And she's done a lot of research on like Noh theater, for example, and I believe also on Kabuki. And she wrote this translation as a part of her PhD work when she was a student at Columbia University. And yeah, so she was a very interesting individual. Unfortunately, she is no longer with us, but she was very interesting. So some important facts about what we just read. Lady Nijō was born Nakanoin Masatada no Musume, or the daughter of Nakanoin Masatada, in around the year 1258. She was the consort to the Emperor Go-Fukakusa. And as I mentioned, her father was Nakanoin Masatada, a lower ranking court official. And she had multiple romances. We are introduced to the two biggest ones in this first part of the book. Of course, her relationship with Emperor Go-Fukakusa, which has its ups and downs already. And then her relationship with Yuki no Akebono, who is believed to be the retainer Sanekane, but we don't actually know for sure if that's the case. As you can see, it's kind of a diary, but written in the style of a monogatari. There's a lot of this storytelling aspect that she uses, but she's talking about her own life. Because of this, we kind of don't know how much of this is true and how much of this is just like imaginary or just kind of fluff added onto the real details of her life. There are several sections that are very similar to the Tale of Genji, and also like not just when we read it, we can kind of tell that there are sections that are similar to the Tale of Genji if we've read it, but also she explicitly states sometimes, oh, and I was thinking about Genji at this point, or Lady Murasaki at this other point. So there's a lot of connection with the literary past. There is no reception history, as was talked about in the introduction. It was discovered in a science section in the Imperial Archives in the 1940s, specifically in the year 1940. And because of the war, World War II, it was not published in Japan until the 1950s. There was an annotated version in Japanese published in the 1960s, and then finally there were two translations done in the 1970s. The one we were reading, of course, is the one by Karen Brazell, which is 1972, but we also have the Wilfred Whitehouse and Eizo Yanagisawa translation, which came out in 1974. And there, Karen Brazell talked about aesthetics and changing aesthetics from the Heian period to now. Whereas in the Heian period, there was this very strong sense of imamekashi, and like everything had to be current and everything had to be of the time and in fashion. Now, as soon as we leave, pretty much throughout the rest of pre-modern Japanese history, starting in the medieval period and ending really with the Meiji period, there are these very huge waves of nostalgia towards the Heian period and wanting to return to the just glamour and splendor of the imperial court at that time. And the Kamakura period is one of the strongest waves if they really want to try and return, but unfortunately that is not the case. There is a crumbling aristocracy with the establishment of feudalism and the Kamakura Bakufu, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But yeah, so that's important facts. Oh, actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. So, I just wanted to give a little bit of introduction to the Kamakura period. This painting is from the Edo period, so it's a lot more modern in that sense, but it is by Utagawa Yoshitora, and it is female divers encountering the ghosts of the Taira clan on the bottom of the sea at Dan no Ura. The reason why I picked this is because it's a very good illustration of the overall mood of the Kamakura period. It is a very turbulent time that starts and ends with war. It starts because at the end of the Heian period, for like almost the entirety of the 12th century, there was this massive battle between two major clans, the Genji clans, which were all the Minamoto people, and the Taira clans, the Heike clans, which was all the Taira members. And they were basically fighting over dominance over the realm, and it was a very bloody battle that lasted for a very long time. But it ultimately ended with the Genji absolutely crushing the Heike in the Battle of Dan no Ura at the end of the Heian period. And that leads us into the Kamakura period with the start of the feudal government, because the Genji were so powerful that the emperor almost wanted to reward them in a sense, and so gave the military a bit more power, which led to the establishment of feudalism. And we have the Kamakura government, which is located to the east of Kyoto along the ocean. And for a little while, there is stability, but ultimately, as the imperial court starts waning, the military starts testing their boundaries more, and it starts a massive period that stretches beyond the Kamakura period of battle between the imperial court and the military court. And the imperial court starts deteriorating really in Lady Nijō's lifetime, because the very first seeds, I would say, of this conflict start with Emperor Gofukaksa and the rivalry with his brother, the Emperor Kameyama. Gofukaksa became emperor first. Kameyama, though, was favored by his parents, and so he ended up usurping Gofukaksa, and Gofukaksa was forced to retire. And Kameyama was emperor for a while, but then Kameyama retired, then you have two retired emperors, and then there was a very heated debate over whose child was going to be the crown prince and who was going to be next for emperor. And this seeds of the split in the imperial line, this is the only time in the imperial history that there was a split in this line. And it leads into the deterioration of the Kamakura period into all out, like hundreds of years of just nonstop bloodshed and battle in the medieval era. but it starts here. And so Lady Nijō is living in a very interesting time where she is seeing the beginnings of this, and she's like right at the center of it. Yes, and then I just wanted to go over a couple of the episodes that we had in this first book. We have one of the most moving sections, in my opinion, one of the most shocking, in my opinion, is the ripping of the kimono that happens right at the beginning, where Gofukaksa sees Lady Nijō for the second time, and this time he gets so impatient with her unwillingness that he just forces himself on her, and it's a really vivid depiction of what is happening for the time period. If we look back at the Heian period texts, these things happened, but they were not illustrated with as much detail as how Lady Nijō treated it. And that's saying a lot, because Lady Nijō, from a modern perspective, does not really treat it with a lot of detail. So this is a huge moment, I think, in Japanese literature, and it's literally the ripping of the kimono is such a vivid image for the time, especially considering how important clothing is. And we can get a sense of that in her narrative. She talks about what people are wearing and what she is wearing all the time. So I thought that was very important to highlight. We also have the death of the Emperor Go saga, or the retired Emperor Go saga, and the supernatural events that happened around that, the ghosts that haunt the palace and whatnot. We have the death of Lady Nijo's father. We have the arrival of the first romance outside of Lady Nijo's relationship with Gofukaksa, with Yuki no Akebono. And then we have a couple episodes of childbirth and also child death that happened. We have the introduction of the High Priestess of Ise Jingu, Ise Shrine, which is an event that concerns Emperor Gofukaksa. Gofukaksa really thinks she's quite attractive and wants to spend time with her, but she is a very naive child, basically. That's kind of how she's described, and pushed away by Lady Nijō. And you can see that she's like kind of jealous, but also not really, like she understands, but she's not comfortable with it. And then we also have the beginning of Empress Higashi Nijō's resentment towards Lady Nijō, and how she is trying to do everything in her power to just get Lady Nijō out of her life and away from Emperor Gofukaksa, somewhat in a similar way to Lady Kokiden in the Tale of Genji, I thought, if you want to consider Lady Nijō as a Genji character.